Right. Hello everyone. My name is Wei Tan. I'm a lecturer in Queen Mary University. Now I'm going to give you a brief talk on the mechanical and electrochemical properties of a structural power composite. So for most of you knows, battery packs for the electric vehicles are normally very heavy. They're making up more than 30% of the total mass. So as you can see, nowadays, there's a very novel concept called massless structure power composite, which means it can not only carry mechanical load, but also store electric energy simultaneously. So by using this concept, we can save more weight and use some of the secondary structure to store energy that is used to extend our driving range. So that is very helpful. But when we're looking at the existing structural, either supercapacitors, which offer high power density, or struct battery, which offer the maximum energy density, they are sitting in the mature chart. Struct battery is overlapping with the lithium-ion battery, and structural supercapacitors is overlapping with the conventional double-layer capacitors. The question is there any possibility to bridge the gaps between the supercapacitor and the lithium-ion batteries and also keep a good mechanical properties? So, for instance, fitting the Ashby chart in this area. So there's another type of supercapacitor called pseudocapacitors. It's somewhere between the pseudo supercapacitors and the batteries. Essentially, the configuration is shown in this figure. Two current collectors are coated with the electrode materials, as the green one. The electrolytes conduct ions between the electrode and across the separators while insulating against electron flows. So the key material here is the electrode. So in our study, we have presented a novel material called carbon nanotube polyaniline composite, PANI. And polyaniline is such a material actually called conductor polymers. It can actually allow the electron transfer during the charge and discharge. So it's acting similar like the battery. And we have used this torted carbon nanotube mat, which essentially as the backbone materials. It can able to coat this PANI on these nanoscale bundles. As you can see here, as the PANI content increase, the the air which is shown in this original mat is gradually filled by these PANI materials. And this PANI actually forms active materials. And the carbon nanotube bundle itself is acting as the current collector. And these porous electrode microstructures allow the electrolyte to flow into the pores upon immersions, so that perfect structures for this type of structure power composite. The research questions has really been intriguing. So first one is, what control the electrochemical properties of the CNT-PANI composite electrode? We've done these cyclic voltammetries of CNT-PANI composite, and by applying a triangular waveform of voltage like this, we're able to observe the change of the current against the voltage, like these CV curves. Essentially, the starting point here, and after going through the loop change of the voltage is showing the difference of current, and some of the peak here showing the characteristic behavior of PANI. And PANI moleculars actually in that state it convert between different chemical states. So we call it LS, ES, and PS state. Basically, they have different chemical structures, but during that change, you are mimicking the redox reactions, and that can help to store the electric energies. like here, the larger the loop here, the higher the energy stored. So when we plot the capacitance against the mass of the PANI, you can see we have varied the scan rate. Scan rate is the changing of the voltage against the time. The lower the scan rate, actually, the higher the capacitance it can store, because you allow more time for this diffusion to happen and allow more time for the redox reactions like the batteries. So capacitance essentially increase with the increasing PANI volume fractions and the decreasing when you decrease the scan rate. The conversion efficiencies here essentially meaning how much PANI is converted from one state to the other state. And due to the time dependency of these Faraday reactions upon charge discharge, that means the lower the scan rate, the longer time it can have the reaction. Therefore, the conversion efficiency is also higher, like showing here, these three lines. And the higher the volume fraction of PANI, the lower the conversion efficiency, because really it's just that thin layer of the PANI in contact with the electrolyte is really contribute the reactions. The second question is, how does the composition of CNT and PANI affect the mechanical properties? So in this mechanical part, we have categorized the mechanical performance. Really, we conduct several different tests from just CNT bare mat to the CNT-PANI with the highest amount of PANI. And we see the increasing behavior of the strength and the stiffness. And we can also see some anisotropy when we test the material in the longitudinal direction and the transverse direction. What is the effect of PANI state of charge and charge cycles on the electrode? As we mentioned before, depending on the state of charge, like charge the material at different voltage, there is different states for the PANI. So in this test, we try to use some pre-charge. So we charge the electrode at a certain voltage and hold that for a certain time. And then we measure the CV performance and measure the capacitance. After several tests, we found actually, regardless of the initial composition and the state of charge, the electrode essentially, you can see these lines, the capacitance vary almost linearly with the measured PANI mass fractions. So essentially, you can find this type of material is only depending on how much PANI is coated on the CNT. You may find if we charge in a high voltage, there's some degradation, then that means 1 volt, you actually decrease the PANI mass. Therefore, the capacitance also dropping. How about the mechanical behavior after that pre-charge? We have seen that if we charge it in a kind of safe operational window, which is between 0 voltage to 0.6, we have introduced very limited effect on the mechanical behaviors. However, if we charge it in 1 volt or negative 0.2 volt, there was a significant change of the PANI behaviors. And that mainly correlates with the change of the microstructures and the PANI content. And we can see actually after 1,000 cycles of the PANI, you can see there's some degradation happens. Therefore, the mechanical property also decrease. And for CNT mat without PANI after 1,000 cycles, you are not really generate too much difference. The last question is how to model the mechanical behavior of CNT-PANI. So if you look at the microstructures of CNT-PANI, essentially the CNT mat is like this. After coating PANI, there's a very thick layer of coating coated on the CNT bundles. So we imagine the picture like this. You have the CNT bundle like these black lines, and you have the PANI layers just coat on the as a sheath of coating on the surface of the bundles. The question is, does the PANI actually infiltrate inside the CNT bundles? The answer is no. in one of our papers we published, we have proved that the polymer is hard to penetrate into the CNT bundle, with the gap is tiny, the nanometer size, and it's only able to coat on the surface of the bundle. So with that evidence, we can actually model CNT-PANI composite like this. So essentially, we actually model this material as a honeycomb network where a layer for PANI is just attached on the honeycomb backbones. And if we simplify the structure, just take a unit cell of this network, we can apply periodic boundary conditions and vary the content of the PANI and also the CNT so that we can vary the CNT volume fraction, the PANI volume fractions, and try to model the mechanic behaviors. For example, we can actually, you see the predict effect of the PANI content if we increase the PANI. It's relatively minor compared to that of the CNT volume fraction, FB. So if we change the CNT bundle fractions from here to here, there's a significant change of the modulus and also the yield strength. But if we change the PANI volume fraction from 0 to 0.3, there's a limited change on that. That proves actually for the mechanical part, it's really the backbone is taking control and dominate the mechanic behaviors. The reason why we see some change in the mechanical properties because there's a shrinkage and swelling of the CNT during this PANI coating. So essentially, it will also affect the mechanical properties. And where are we in the material chart? After finish the test, we plot our data into the material chart. The red circle is our data. So you can see it spanned along this map, and the specific power and specific energy is actually overlapping with lithium battery and supercapacitors. And if you look at the other side, our electrode, these red circles, possess up to 63% of the theoretical value of PANI. And the tensile strength, actually, we mentioned before, is comparable to those of engineering alloy like aluminum alloys. So that's very promising. We have actually made some prototype of CNT-PANI pseudocapacitors. To be able to light a LED, we need to connect them in series to give enough voltage. So 3 of them in series to give us a 2.4 voltage. And then we put that cells embedded into a CFRP to see if it still can give us a good capacitance. Yes, it can. It can give us about 210 farad per gram. It's about 20% of the theoretical capacitance. And if you look at the flexural modulus, 58 gigapascal, that's mainly contributed by the unidirectional CFRPs. So as long as the capacitor is not downgrade the mechanical properties, we think it's good. It still can do a lot of jobs. So if you want to scale up these things, you need to connect them in series or in parallels like the battery packs so that it can scale up. The good thing is like a thin laminate. You can put it in the surface, internal structure, or as the internal sandwich structure of the existing CFRP. So in conclusion, so in our study, we found actually the Young's modulus and yield strength, essentially the mechanical properties depend on the CNT volume fractions in a nonlinear manner. And also there's a minor extent upon the PANI volume fractions. The electrode capacitance, in contrast, rise with the increasing of a PANI volume fractions over the range of the electrode compositions. The reduction in PANI mass in our pre-charging effect actually decreased the capacitance of the CNT-PANI electrode. The honeycomb unicell model is actually very capable to capture the stress-strain response of the CNT-PANI electrode accurately. If you want to know more information on this work, we have actually published this paper in the Journal of Energy Storage. Feel free to read that papers. And I want to acknowledge my colleagues. Most of them are in Cambridge. Professor Norman Fleck, Professor Michael D. Wolders, and all other collaborators, and my sponsors. And now I'm in Queen Mary University.